At this time, I would like to welcome to the podium Professor David Lamb from the Precision Ag Research Group at the University of New England. Dave is always an interesting and enthusiastic speaker, and I look forward to hear what he has to say regarding Project 4.1.2, Biomass Business.
Thank you, George. I guess that's code for a loose cannon, but I'll try to keep it clean. Look, Biomass Business is a project that's been a long time in its synthesis. It has been designed right from the very beginning by end users and service providers all sitting around the table together, learning each other's language, and of course you bring the academics in and that confounds it even more. But ranging 12 organisations from research providers, as I said, to key end users. We've got 4 of Australia's top 20 farmers, corporate farmers, Twynham, Clyde Agriculture, Milne Agri Group, and Sundown Pastoral Company. And so what this is almost a seamless continuance from the Clever Cattle and Cropping Systems project that we initially undertook at the last years of the earlier CRC. Now this is a farm. I guess this is a biomass business farm. When you're into agricultural production, every little piece of that landscape and what's walking around on it or buried within it is every part of that biomass spectrum is part of the business. And so we're not only talking about crops and grain yield, we're talking about pasture production, livestock grazing on pasture land and forage crops. We're talking about soil moisture, we're talking about remnant vegetation, scrub, dead timber lying around, you name it. It all goes in. Now, whilst that slide serves to illustrate my point about giving you a concept of what biomass business spans, one of my farming colleagues who I put this in front of gave me probably the ultimate summary of it all. From their perspective, that is agri-porn. And at the end of the day, we are not in the business of creating new forms of agri-porn. We need to provide these guys, these men and women, with tools that make a difference to their daily lives in terms of managing the productivity of their systems. So I found it a great wake-up and I use it all the time. So what are the key objectives of biomass business? At the end of the day, we do want to develop, evaluate and ultimately provide. Now, it's a mix of knowledge, measurement and interpretation protocols that are relevant to not only agricultural production, but also public lands as well, because public and private lands are inextricably linked and they're shared in many cases. If you bear in mind that 62% of Australia's land mass is agricultural land, more than half of that is, in fact, some form of public land or leasehold. And 50% of that is trodden on by animals in livestock production. So it's all inextricably linked. So the tools and ideas that we're developing up with our farmers, fit for purpose, are designed to be, if you like, transferable across. So what are the areas that we're targeting within our key objective, our general statement of objectives? It's looking at enabling tools or approaches to improve water and fertiliser use efficiency in crops and pastures. That's rain-fed irrigated crops and rangelands. The first one, of course, the earlier one, is just being able to quantify yield and biomass and, if necessary, carbon on these farmscapes. Because carbon, it goes hot and it goes cold, depending on which paper you read in which week. But carbon is likely to be here to stay in one form or another, and farmers are interested in that from a production perspective. And also pasture utilisation, as I commented, 50% of Australia is being trodden on by livestock, yet the average pasture use efficiency across the sector is about 30%. Now, if you consider the world's population is increasing by 3 every second, and by the end of this talk, if I'm on time, there'll be 2,500 mouths to feed. Excuse me if I have to duck out straight away, we've got work to do. But at the end of the day, we need to improve that, because that is where our greatest scope, or one of our greatest potential scopes of improving our productivity lie, is in livestock. And that's a key component of this project. But if you're going to quantify biomass or biomass generation efficiency, be it pasture use efficiency or water use efficiency, we need the tools to be able to quantify how much biomass have we got in our production system, and, for example, how do we measure that against the available drivers such as water. Now, if you're going to develop new tools for farmers, the first thing that we've learned from these guys is get in their sheds and have a sniff around and see what they're already using, because chances are we could take whatever they're using and value add it and give them something back using familiar equipment and knowledge they've already got. This is an example. One of the key challenges that our farming community are faced with, who do want to choose to buy into remote sensing tools for agriculture, is the accessibility of the platforms and the sensors when they need it, and obviously clear weather, and having ground staff who are available to help in whatever supporting ground truth activities are necessary. There recently has been the emergence of active optical sensors like these sort of crop circle and green seekers. These have their own red and near-infrared light sources flashing away. They're handheld. You hold them about a metre off the crop, modulated light source. And these tools were developed in the US predominantly to manage nitrogen in corn, for example. But a lot of Australian growers are interested in using them to look at crop biomass assessment and pasture biomass assessment, almost as a personal tool that gets thrown in the back of the ute and driven around and just pulled out whenever it's needed. And we've certainly in CRC SI1, we did some early work with Sundown Pastoral Company and indeed Twynham and Landgate as well, at looking at how we can use tools like this as an objective pasture assessment tool. The reality of it is that livestock handlers, stockmen and women, cannot assess biomass yet. They're the people who are making decisions about moving stock on and off paddocks. So we've been working with them to look at approaches for calibration and how we can use that to give them a tool to provide contemporary data sets. And certainly there are already satellite-based pasture assessment tools available. Pastures in Space, I guess, is an exemplar. It's highly regarded around the world. They're not available around the world. But the unfortunate limitation of these sort of products is they are provided by relatively coarse resolution satellites. We're talking spatial resolution of 250 metres. And if you want to take these sensors, which are quite effectively used in Western Australia, over to the east coast, then you're dealing with much smaller paddocks, 50 to 80 hectares in size. And if you take Sundown Pastoral Company, for example, they're looking at managing 140 mobs of cattle in 200 paddocks with rotational frequencies down, or rotational periods down to 3 or 4 days. And at the end of the day, and I have to explain why I'm wearing socks, the other side of the coin is this remains the most important GIS tool in the farmer's toolkit. So, so what they're saying is, hey, give us some tools that we can go out and scout in the field with while we're there. We're looking around. If you can give us some objective tools, sure. We don't necessarily have to replace these guys, just value add them. And certainly, we can spatially enable them, easy enough. Okay. So there's an example of some value-add products that the CRC has been responsible for putting in farmers' hands in CRC SI1 and certainly informed our thinking for CRC SI2. In fact, walking around the paddock, if you can hold a sensor a metre above the deck, then there's no reason why you can't put in a plane and fly it a metre above the deck. We've taken the very same sensors and put them in the belly of crop dusting aircraft. These guys routinely fly metres above crop canopies at 120 knots, day or night. So if these people are performing, between 2 and 4 flyovers on a crop during the growing season, why not give them the capacity to collect remotely sensed information, which is similar, in fact, to what you get from an airborne or satellite system. On the left, that's a crop circle-derived map of PCD, or simple ratio, near-infrared overhead reflectance. On the right is a multispectral imaging system provided by a commercial provider who we got to overfly the same day. Granularity is a little different, but that's really boils down to the sampling frequency and so forth. But the general patterns are there. And on the left, of course, that data could have been collected at night or on the cloud. The cloud height could have been down to 4.1 metres above the deck, which is good for Armidale. And also it's absolute data. It's its own onboard light source. What you see are reflectance values or indices derived from reflectance values, not digital numbers, suitably scaled accordingly to make them look like reflectance numbers, which seems to be an issue we find certainly in the agricultural sector. Of course, whilst the pilots enjoy flying these sensors at 4 metres above the deck, it gets a little difficult when the built environment gets involved. Or even trees. So in CRC SI1, we demonstrated the use of these low-level sensors in aircraft. In the last 6 months, as part of our biomass business project, we've worked with a company in the States and developed a souped-up version of that on effectively a system on steroids, which allows us to fly these sensors up to 50 metres above the deck. And what we've done here is just demonstrated an example trial we just completed 2 months ago or 3 months ago. Out on our Sundown partner, Wheatfield. The image on the left, in fact, is the on-ground sensor that the technical officer, CRC technical officer Derek Schneider, loved flying around the paddock on his motorbike collecting. And of course, the ones that follow on from left to right are taken at progressively increasing altitudes. So now we've got interest in the sugar industry about flying these up north, flying this sort of data up north. We're certainly keen now to extend it into the rain-fed cropping country that is undulating, and indeed the pasture country as well, which is of course where biomass business will take it and continue. We have a PhD student, Mick Schaefer, part of the in-kind contribution into the project from a partner. Mick is a physics PhD student, but he thinks he can go one step better than 150 feet. So he's working on a laser-based sensor that will get him much higher as well. So, you know, now this sort of technology doesn't necessarily have to be just for crop sensing. If you consider the perennial issues about calibrating remotely sensed data, be it from airborne imaging systems, for example, why not have a system like this bolted on the belly, collect your string of images or every region you go to, swoop down to 150 feet, fly a calibration transect through the field, which is going to be then ultimately geo-referenced to the image, and then move on to the next field. And what you have got are strips of self-made calibration data sets. You do not need to go out putting out reflectance panels in the paddock, which is a perennial problem for all of us that are playing with remote sensing. In biomass business, we're keen to work with our partners Landgate, Tom Scoot, Jenny Davis from Milne Agri Group, which is one of the biggest pastoral companies in the West, and of course Landgate, Richard Stovalt's team, keen to take the pastures and space sort of product functionality and move it into rangeland. So this is not monoculture pastures. This is country now where you have significant variations in spatial temporal composition of what's underfoot. And it's the same old issue about how do you unmix satellite image pixels to give you information about what's kicking the values around underfoot. But now there's a whole range of new data that's coming on board. Sorry, George, was that a prompt? No, cool. Just excited. I like it. Okay. But you let me know. Okay, looking around the shed, you know, farmers out there are already either using their own or paying service providers to collect the electromagnetic induction maps of their fields, effectively soil maps. Of course, the EMI instrument responds to a lot more than just soil texture. It's driven by water and iron content, for example. It's an electrical conductivity sensing instrument. And this is one of the ubiquitous technologies associated with precision ag. And are they getting enough out of it? Well, if they're saying to us now, we need to quantify water use efficiency, that is kilograms of biomass per millimetre of water that's in our fields, then I suggest that it's not being used enough, and these sensors could potentially be calibrated to give you millimetres of water in the field. So one of the activities we're doing with our farming partners is to look at the resilience and the utility of simple calibrators, site-specific calibrators, to get that electromagnetic induction measurements of conductivity to what counts to them, that is millimetres of water underfoot at any given time, because that helps them plan their fertiliser application, or indeed if it's an irrigation scheduling, if it's an irrigated field, how to plan their irrigation scheduling. Because ultimately this is a concept map of where it can go. If you can quantify the change in millimetres of water of a field over time, using a technique that they're already using out in the field just for general dumb mapping, as we call it, or as they call it to me, then, you know, if we can come up with quantitative measures of how much water is being consumed for crop development, then what we end up with is an enterprise relevant measure of water use efficiency. How many tonnes of grain, how many bales of cotton, how many kilograms of pasture are you producing per millimetre of water, either irrigated or rain-fed underfoot? And that's what they've set us as a challenge, and we believe there's some angles of attack we can take with our partners in this. Now the future is here when it comes to livestock. Okay, GPS or RF triangulation ear tags are now here. Okay, now they are still in rudimentary form. The biggest bulk of this ear tag is in the power supply. This will give you 3 years life, but at the end of the day, you can effectively track your livestock, and the price will come down, and the form factor will even come down smaller than this. Apart from the bulk of the battery there, on the right hand side, that's the antenna. Now, but there are already now products out there that allow you to dial up on your iPhone and see exactly where your livestock are, like in that map on the left. Visually pleasing, but I suspect heading towards the agro-porn angle. But if you are a small landholder like myself and a couple of us in the room, you know, we do want to know where Horatio is and what days he's doing and so forth. But the real challenge is, of course, is when you have data like that on the right, what do you do with it? Now, remember, and I love the term I heard yesterday, you know, there's a lot of yip-yap about yap, and, you know, portals and logging in and seeing huge arrays of data. But people may not necessarily, like farmers, have the time to interrogate it. So you know, the challenge we've been put is take this information and reduce it to something that matters. Sure, a grazing pressure map. You know, farmers measure grazing pressure, livestock pressure in terms of DSE, dry stock equivalents. And that's a 15 DSE map. 15 cows marched in on that paddock per hectare, but the actual time they spend grazing ranges from effectively 0 to 1 DSE out to 250 DSE. There's an enormous amount of variability in how the livestock are utilising it. Can you take that position information and reduce it to a trigger point? Is their behaviour changing because they are calving, or because of animal predation, or because they're running out of feed? Cattle think they run out of feed before farmers do. That's a fact of life. And at the end of the day, it's about reducing it to a single piece of information that can be triggered out on an SMS alarm. By the way, that's not a caricature of a farmer. That's Mark Trotter, one of your CRC-funded postdocs, just in case you thought he looked like a hippie. But we've still got to put all the information together. So yes, agri-porn is going to be here to stay, but it's got to be reduced into a interpretable and actionable format. And just to quickly close out, because I think George is going to come up and flog my boots. One other angle is, can we use some of this data that's on farm to push towards carbon inventorying on farm? And one of the activities we've been doing with our New South Wales Department of Environment and Climate Change partners has been just looking at what data is already available to farmers free, or as part of their enterprise activities already, and can it be tied together? But it's getting it all together. In CRCSI 1, we introduced the concept of RADIS, Remote Agronomic Diagnostic and Advisory Systems, and using, you know, computer-based, iPhone-based virtual collaborative environments. In fact, one of the really wonderful outcomes of it, and I hope I'll get a chance to tell you more about this at a future time, is an iPhone application, a simple iPhone application that when you log in as a farmer, you can take photos of things that matter on the ground. We've trialled it with farmers and service providers now, got a really good rap, and the stuff can be uploaded onto a Google-based, Google Earth type platform to provide the contemporaneous data that's needed to ground truth all this wonderful information that's been warehoused and offered back to farmers. So that's something we're keen to see. Now, I wasn't sure if I should call this one Showing the Way or Showing Way, because at the end of the day, the agriculture sector, in the space of the last 6 months in biomass business, and we've not gone out there to tart ourselves, they're taking an interest. Biomass business from this CRC took the centerfold in the Agriculture 2020 vision document. It's been in the land 3 times in the last 6 months, and we get plagued with requests. You know, what are you doing now? So there's a lot of interest there. So I hope that some of you in this room would like to join us and get on with feeding the world. Thank you.